Tranås.
Tranås. Okay, I was just checking where exactly it is. It seems to be quite in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly. One sentence they always say about this place is it's between somewhere and nowhere. Oh, we are live. Yeah. So Markus, nice to have you here. Thank you for accepting this interview.
Thanks for having me.
And we are screening a film by Markus Maicher in this festival. It's called Mountain View. It was premiered yesterday evening, and it will remain available online until the end of the festival, so the 18th of October. So maybe some of the people that are following us maybe already saw it, some others probably not, but it's online. You can always go and check it. So Markus, I wanted to ask you some questions about this film. It's a quite hypnotic film. I found it to be, and it's a film where we see three continuous zoom towards a landscape outside of a window that you deconstructed into a discontinuous appearance of still frames, single frames, that you perceive separately somehow. So the first question is, how did you had the ideas for this film? How was this film born?
So I was spending 2 weeks in this place where I shot the film. It was a castle in Austria, in Salzburg, and they had a summer academy there. So it was sort of a 2 weeks analog filmmaking workshop, and we had this really beautiful view for the whole 2 weeks there, out of these small castle windows. And the more I looked out of the window, the more sort of surreal it seemed to me, and the more it became an image more than a real landscape. So I wanted to work with that, and then also with the idea of having this framed view through this window, which is like a basic cinematic motif. The frame, or also the frame within the frame. And yeah, then I wanted to make this zoom, and sort of the idea was the closer you get to what's out there, the more it dissolves. So I made I overexposed the film in the end, and so yeah, it was sort of a philosophical idea in the beginning, that the more you approach reality, the more it disappears. And I made the zoom, and I wanted to make just the film out of this one zoom. And then things started to go wrong, and I don't know, the camera fell apart, and the floor was shaking. So I had like 3 different takes of the same zoom. And then when I came back, I started thinking about how to work with this material, and then I had this idea to sort of think about the relation between this organic movement, which I did by hand, and also the organicity of analog film, because it was shot on 16 millimeter film with an old Russian Kino camera. So this on the one hand, and then on the other hand, the sort of the digital, the concrete, not concrete, the discreteness of the digital. So I started to cut up the films digitally into single frames, and I sort of made a structure with sort of the 3 possible variations in between the single frames of the 3 films, and yeah, that then became the film. And I didn't know how it's going to look like. So I was just, in the beginning, I was just trying this out as an idea, and then sort of this hypnotic feeling. I had the same feeling when I saw like the first 10 seconds of it, and then I decided to go on with it and and create a film like this.
Yeah, it's interesting, as you said, when like just the experience of watching out of a window and perceiving the landscape as something almost unreal, like more an image than reality. I think this is something that probably everybody has lived at least once, like this feeling, because just the existence of a window is creating this somehow this illusion. So it's true that in your film it's like you get a similar kind of feeling, but much stronger, much more increased, and that's what brings you to this this hypnotic, almost vertigo experience that you have. Yeah, and I also read on your bio that you are a filmmaker and urbanist, and I felt that Mountain View, of course, is a film where the perception of space plays an important role, because for me, my impression was that in the same time, this film reveals somehow the illusory nature of the film image on the one side, and I mean the illusory nature of spatial depth inside the film image. And in the same time, it also, on the other hand, it also creates a new space. Like so, what I wanted to ask you is also, for the fact that you are also a urbanist, how relevant is this this theme of the perception of space in your films?
Yeah, I think it sort of informs this film definitely, and also other films or experiments that I made. Insofar as I'm interested theoretically in the question of not only urban space but space in general, and I try to connect this with a sort of experimental filmmaking, and also with thinking about analog film and possibilities of, as you said, creating or first of all reflecting about the nature of space, but on the other hand also creating different spaces, or let's say a different experience of space. And yeah, one thing that you mentioned was definitely something that I thought about, this sort of relation between surface and depth. And usually film is sort of creates a illusionary three-dimensional space beyond the canvas, where some form of narrative unfolds. And this narrative usually goes through different stages, and then in the end, there's a resolution of the narrative. And but at the same time, it's just a two-dimensional flat surface that we are looking at. So I wanted to sort of reflect on this relationship. On the one hand, this view, like a view outside the window into another sort of illusionary space, but then somehow destroying this illusion by creating a film that shows you that it's just sort of flat single images that are following one another. So that on the one hand, there's an illusion, sort of, as you said, the filmic image is an image and not reality. But then on the other hand, I mean, you could go and argue sometimes, or not sometimes, but also reality can appear as an image, and does so more and more, I guess, in sort of our technologically mediated environment. I guess this question of resolution also interested me, insofar as our perception of reality depends more and more on its resolution. And on the other hand, there's the different meaning of the word resolution that sort of like a narrative resolves in the end. And I feel like in in my film, I not only get hypnotized, but also frustrated in a way, because it doesn't, you seem to not get anywhere, even though, you go further into the space, you're not actually going anywhere. And in the end, it just sort of disappears. So yeah, that sums it up, I think.
You explained it perfectly. It's true. It's all these things are things I also felt when I watched your film, and now I was just wondering if it's possible. As you said, usually films are made in a way that you are brought to somehow to forget that you are watching a two-dimensional surface, and this is the aim that they have. Like, if you forget that, then the film is good.
Mm-hmm.
You did the opposite, so you were always constantly remembering the viewer about this two-dimensional surface, and in the same time I felt maybe really with your film it becomes really clear that perceiving the surface as a two-dimensional and in the same time being inside of what you are seeing, maybe they are not so these two perception of the image can still live together. Like, you can still be able to not forget completely about the two-dimensional space, but in the same time be inside, because this is what happened, at least to me, with your film. Like, it's true. I was perceiving it as an image, but in the same time I was also feeling that I was inside a strange space. Like, I don't know, I was somewhere else. So yeah, this is not a question, it's just something that came to my mind now, but
Yeah.
I was wondering if you feel the same about this.
I'm happy that the film seems to, I don't want to say work, but it seems to give some sort of aesthetic experience as well on a screen, on a computer display, because I suppose everyone just saw the film on their laptops and not in the cinema. So I feel the same way that I hope there's a sort of a deconstructive idea behind the film, but it wasn't my intention, or at least I hope that the film is not only that, but also a visual experience that you can have without having to think about these things, or without having to intellectually reflect on what you're seeing. And also, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to be sort of to be sucked into a film and sort of live in this reality without being constantly reminded that you are seeing a film. I mean, this was, a very typical experimental film practice in the 70s, and it's not always pleasurable to see those films. They're more, sort of educational, or and I feel the same way as you. I think it's good if it has both dimensions, and
regarding the fact that people are watching it on like laptop screens or computer screens, it's true. Like, probably, I mean, in this specific case, it's I think it's the case because the festival is online. Personally, I watched it both on a laptop and with a projector, like a home projector, not in a cinema, of course. And I felt that also through a laptop. I mean, at least for me, I felt that it was I could be inside, like I could enjoy the experience. So yeah, for at least I can tell you, for my experience, it works in that sense. Of course, seeing that image in a cinema, it's always different, but this is a problem that I mean, it's something we are living with all the films, and like as a festival, we also ask ourselves this question, but it's the situation now. Yeah. So now my last question was just I was curious to know if you are working on new projects at the moment, and what are your interests? Yeah, the things you are exploring at the moment.
Right now, I'm working on material that I shot in Canada at the film farm. It's a great sort of a retreat or workshop of Phil Hoffman, where you work with analog film, only with black and white, sort of cheap film stock on an old farm that the filmmaker Phil Hoffman sort of he made it into dark room and cinema projection room, and I was there and then brought back all this sort of analog material, and now I'm trying to work on that. And in general, I'm working mostly on analog film. Mm-hmm. I'm also part of a artist-run lab called Film Co-op in Vienna, and where we have spaces for working on analog film, all the machinery and equipment and micro cinema. And so I'm sort of interested in the qualities of analog film, also in relation to our digital environment. So for me, analog film material it's more than a fetish to go back to this sort of a very hard to work with material, even though you can see it in all areas of culture, of course, that the people tend to go retro, but it also has some qualities that you cannot reduce to this sort of fetish, I think. And it's becoming more apparent the more analog film is not the industry standard anymore. So it's free, analog film is sort of free to be experimented with. And maybe more with what you capture on a film strip. You can experiment with the material itself, with the sort of organic celluloid. In the sense of sort of experimenting with chemistry, trying to make films without a camera, and sort of coloring your own black and white films, and of course hand developing your film. So this, I think, it's a very big part of working with analog film, that you get a sort of bodily relationship to the film material, because you are the one loading the film in the camera. You have to understand the mechanism of the camera, how the chemistry works. You load the film in a sort of a Lomo tank. You pour the chemistry in, and in the end you get a quite dirty sort of a finished film, or maybe you don't even get an image because something went wrong in the whole process. But the whole process is sort of recorded on this strip of film. And it's a sort of a living, it's not only a representation, but a material trace of all of this. And that seems to me very different from digital film, because it doesn't have a sort of an indexical relation to the world, but it's sort of a translation of sort of a continuous space into discontinuous bits and pixels. So yeah, I'm very interested in this relationship between the analog and the digital, and then it's interesting when my film, it works with single frames, but then you see it as a stream on the laptop, and it's got nothing to do actually anymore with the cinematic dispositif of projecting 24 frames, or in this case it was actually 25 frames per second, but it's sort of a stream that translates this into just calculating the differences between the images and just projecting sort of this, even though what you see is the same thing, but the structure, or I mean, you can argue about that, but it's but the structure behind it is very different, and this structure sort of structures our, I don't know, our being in space and time, and how we perceive our environment, which is becoming more and more filled with images and digital images. So sorry for being way too long. Yeah.
No, 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 it's interesting. No worries. Would you prefer your films to be screened just analogically, or in general, do you feel it's somehow a compromise that you do to screen your films in this way, or you feel it's there is something that interests you also in screening those films digitally, like making them digitally videos somehow?
Mm-hmm. I think it's just a different experience. I don't think there are some filmmakers that never show their analog films digitally, or they don't even digitize them.
Mm-hmm.
In Vienna, we have, the best, like Peter Kubelka. He's one of the best known experimental filmmakers from here, and he's one proponent of this idea that analog film cannot be translated into another medium. This film actually, it only exists in the digital format because it was impossible to cut single frames together. You would need an optical printer. You can do it, but we don't have one at the Film Corp. So this was also more of a question of resources that you have. But in general, I think I'm totally not against it. I don't think it's sort of wrong. I just think it's a different experience. So, for instance, if you see it, be it digital or analog, in the cinema, you have a sort of communal experience. So that's one thing that's specific for the cinema, which you don't have if you see it on your laptop alone at home. It's not dark, you're not in a dark space, just looking at the canvas. And then also, if you project analog film, I think it also differs. If it's in the cinema, everything is hidden behind. I'm a projectionist, so I'm usually behind the glass wall, working with the machines. But if you're just a visitor in the cinema, you don't see all this, so you just see the image on screen. But if you go to labs and micro cinemas, you have all the equipment standing around, and lots of films are silent, so you hear the sound of the projector. You hear when something goes wrong, or usually something goes wrong, and someone has to fix it. So that's also a very different experience, I think, to be sort of within this assemblage of technical things and people, and so I think there's different qualities to different forms of projection and different media.
Yeah, I agree. I was also thinking, as you also for the projection in analogic way, is probably the continuation of the process that is that took place when you were making the film, because the film changes with time. So every time you project it is different, and it's like it's alive, of course.
Yeah.
So at every projection, the experience is completely different because the film has changed. And I agree with you on this. And I think actually I don't have any more questions. Like it was interesting to talk to you, and I usually we leave a bit of space if there is any question from YouTube, because we are on streaming now live on YouTube. So anyone has, I ask to, no questions, okay.
Everything.
So I just I just thank you again for being here, for having been here, and for this interview. And yeah, and I remember to everybody who is following that your film is still available to be watched online until the 18th of October. So please go and watch Markus' film.
Well, thank you very much for having me, for inviting me here, and thanks for this really nice talk, and also thanks for showing my film. And I will now go and watch the other films.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
See you other of your works in the future.
Okay, thank you. See you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.